Hello everyone, it's Mozart here. So, the alt season is still going strong. I'd even say it's in full swing, and I want to congratulate you all on a key event. The market cap for Total 3, which is the market cap of altcoins, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, has been updated. So, the market cap from 2021, I'll pull up the monthly chart, it'll make more sense that way. It was at $1,130 billion and the current market cap is at $1,150 billion. So we've roughly updated it by $20 billion. And the current figure was at $1,150 billion. So that's about a $20 billion increase we've roughly updated it by. Moreover, when looking at the monthly candles, this is a monthly chart. Each candle represents a month. The movement is going well. It is going without divergence, without divergences. If this month closes, well, at least above the $1 trillion mark, I'm talking about December, which has just started, although overall, I think November already closed above that. Let's take a look. In November, it was 71.71. No, it hasn't closed. It's important for December to close above. So, if that happens, then this wave, this monthly wave, could potentially, as we observe, essentially become the second in a five-wave structure in the market. Which, well, it depends on how you look at it, because the first one could have been here. But in any case, if we close without any discrepancies, then the likelihood of all this continuing to move forward will be very high. This is the breakdown of the monthly candles. For that, we need to close the month first. This is the global setup. Plus, there's a pattern forming on the Total 3 chart, targeting about 1.3. For the entire Total 3, that's an additional 17 to 20% from the current levels. And considering that such giants as Cripple or something similar, Dogecoin, what is already in the top of CoinMarketCap has been mined, from their liquidity will flow into other less capitalized coins that have not yet made the same pumps. Plus, November closed with a huge volume, a very high volume. Basically, the chances of continuation, even if it goes through a correction, are still quite high. I already recorded the last video saying that this isn't the end. Basically, since the moment we broke the trillion mark, TotalTree has grown by more than 10% overall. And now let's move on to the weekly chart. So, what do we see on the weekly chart? 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth green candle in a row, the fifth week in a row. But do keep in mind that the volumes are decreasing with each new candle. This will sooner or later, well, more likely sooner, lead to some sort of reasonable correction. So, there was an attempt at a reasonable correction right here. It was about 10%, but I want to warn you, straight away. Most likely, we'll see quite a strong correction in the altcoins. Total 3 won't just keep rising without any pullbacks. Even if you take some super bullish moment from 2021, Total 3 dropped by 20 to 30% before the growth continued. I'm talking from the peak, right from the very top. It was also 38%, well, 30 to 38%. Right now, considering that liquidity is up, it would make perfect sense to expect a correction in the range of 20 to 30%. 20 to 30%. How can it be? So, generally speaking, when an asset breaks its all-time high, and I'm mainly talking about crypto here, specifically Bitcoin, it usually happens in a similar way for all such assets. What are we doing? We either break through the all-time high, and then bounce back down by those 20 to 30% that we're talking about. So, somewhere closer to 1 trillion, maybe even lower, around $900 billion. Or we could break through all of this significantly higher, so somewhere around the 1.3 trillion mark. $1 trillion, so that's still about 20% up from the current levels, and then would come back down for a retest of that previously broken all-time high. So, there are two options here. 1.3, that's exactly where we'll come back down by about 20%, closer to the $1 trillion mark. So, Here are the two main options. Most likely, one of those will definitely happen, so either we'll go into a correction from the current levels, and we'll end up somewhere around here, consolidate, and then continue the rise towards the 1.3 mark. This will be the perfect point to pick up some new medium-term positions with a decent volume. So, not short-term, but medium-term. Or, the second option, we go almost without any significant corrections towards the mark, closer to the 1.3. Here, I'll probably lock in everything I've got, and then wait for a correction to retest the previous high. This is a technical layout, very clear and simple, and this happens almost always on crypto, be it Bitcoin, Ether, Dogecoin, or the entire total. Crypto's technicals suggest growth after corrections, as RSI shows. But the most important thing is that, regardless, after a correction, the likelihood of a new wave of growth is extremely high, considering what's already been indicated by the indicators. So, the weekly RSI has jumped to 80. That's really strong. This is very strong, and even if we move into a bear market, as a rule we need to make some kind of correction, then make a new high. Here is a divergence in RSI and we go into a bear market. So, let's say this kind of format would be quite reasonable before transitioning into a bear market. Although what the bear market will look like after the Bitcoin ETF is adopted remains to be seen. There's definitely a lot more liquidity in the system now. This is the technical setup that I'm expecting overall from the current Altseason, as well as from the coins we've included in our portfolio. I try to lock in this profit partially as it comes in, aiming for the target I just mentioned. So, to re-enter at a lower point when that correction happens. So, as soon as the total gives a correction of 15 to 20%, in total 3, the alts will correct, anywhere from 20 to 50%. Well, from the least overbought to the most overbought coins. And I'll be picking them up. So right now, I'm freeing up some medium-term liquidity. And let's move on to viewing the blockchain. And regarding the coins we talked about, the ones I'm locking in profits on, all of that is shared exclusively in the Telegram channel. Here, we're typically cashing in on the standard multiples from our medium-term positions. The whole portfolio is in massive profit. Basically, everything turned out just as I expected. Even better. Even better. And all these signals were given exclusively in the Telegram channel. I didn't share these trades on YouTube. So, if you don't want to miss out on the new signals, where I'll open the same trades during the correction, I recommend you subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description right below this video. Let's quickly run through blockchain. Altseason can continue if two conditions are met. Bitcoin is sideways, everything fires up. When Bitcoin is on the rise, everything rises, but less dramatically due to Bitcoin's dominance. The first and probably the most favorable condition is while Bitcoin is in a sideways trend, and right now it is in a short-term sideways trend, everything is shooting up. And the second is when Bitcoin is rising, then everything also shoots up, just not as much, because Bitcoin takes away from the dominance. The first metric is how much long-term holders have spent of their volume, depending on what they hold in total, from all the coins. So at the peak, this was, let's have a look, it was on the 22nd of November. Of what they hold in total, from all the coins. So at the peak, this was, let's have a look. It was on the 22nd of November. It was nearly 0.3%. 0.286, but let's round it up to 0.3. Since then, we have adjusted by 0.15, that is, almost twice as much. Here, we can immediately say that this is far from the top. In 2021, peak hit 0.41%. or marks 0, 41%, and after which there was the same correction, approximately twofold, to 0.17% and a new round of growth. So, we've already corrected by half, essentially with a margin, and the likelihood of Bitcoin continuing to grow increases with each day it stays stagnant, and it's just sitting there, not dropping any further, like when we fell to the mark of 91,000, corrected back up, and now we're just moving in this sideways trend, in this chop. It's just sitting there and not dropping any further. Just like when we dropped to the mark of 91,000, corrected back up, and now we're just moving in this sideways trend, in this chop. Spike at 0.3 to 0.4%, 2 to 3 corrections, growth resumes. There is a throw somewhere at the 0.3 to 0.4% mark. Then a correction of 2 to 3 times. And a new round of growth occurs in any cycle and even in a rebound in bear markets. Now we have fallen by about half on this metric and, moreover, we are moving without divergence. There's really nothing to criticize here. The relative realized profit in percentage terms depends not only on the number of coins held in the wallets of long-term holders, but also on the total number of coins in circulation within the Bitcoin blockchain. So here, the peak was also there for us. But here, it's a 7-day smoothing, so it's lagging behind on the 27th of November at 1.6%. Basically the same thing, a similar picture. Even in March, it was over 1.8%. In 2021, figures were nearly 4%, around 3.5%. If we take this metric, almost every time the cycle turns through divergence, it was nearly 4%, 3.5%. Moreover, if we take this metric, we'll see that almost every time the cycle turns around through divergence, the price peaks above the previous, but the indicator peaks below the last. After that, a bear market begins. Now we have neither divergence nor historical profit fixation. In terms of relativity, I mean in terms of percentages, not absolute values. In absolute terms, it is clear that we have ATH, but specifically in terms of percentages. Next, this is the same indicator, only in absolute numbers. As you saw, the realized profit peaked on the 25th of November at $2 billion, specifically from long-term holders, after which that profit dropped by about, well, not by 4, but by 3 times, down to around $690 to $700 million. If we look back at the previous periods, for instance, after the peak profit fixation in January 2021, which was nearly $1 billion, it also dropped by 2 to 3 times down to around $400 to $300 million, and then a new wave of growth happened. Next, we see profit fixation at $970 billion. We're dropping to half, down to 500, a new wave of growth. Next, 730. We're dropping by 1.5 times, a new wave of growth, and so on. And this happens everywhere. And it was the same in 2017. So, there's no discrepancy here either. And overall the amount of profit taken has dropped by nearly 3 times. The price remained. It's a strong indicator, which also suggests that the bottom we saw on the 26th of November was likely the low before the update to $100,000. Before the update to the expected $100,000. I'd be quite shocked, because so far the price has been behaving reasonably and resiliently, considering the speed of the sell-off. Not much lower, but let's say around 87 to 88, somewhere like that. I'd be really surprised because so far the price has been behaving very reasonably and quite resiliently, considering the speed of the sell-off. Moving on. I've already mentioned this indicator to you. This is also a long-term indicator specifically for long-term holders, that is, LPH long-term holders. This is the realized profit divided by the realized loss. Right now, there's practically no loss in the system, especially among the long-term holders, which is why it's at its highs. It also offloaded by about 10 times. But still, the peak sell-offs were even larger. So, the peak sell-off could have been about 50 times. But the most important thing here isn't how many times it offloaded, but that it has come into this zone. I've already shown it to you in previous analyses. So, in this zone, which is the so-called ATZ zone, the indicator stays for a while. And usually, it's a few months. We've been here for a whole month now. I've already mentioned that, by my calculations and estimates, this whole party will probably last until around the middle of spring or the start of summer. That's roughly where we need to exit the market. Moving on. Smaller. Let's take a closer look. This is our MBRV profit, that is, market value, realized value, specifically for short-term holders. Let's touch on them in this analysis as well. The peak profits were made on November 11th, with a 20% profit for them. These are specifically the short-term holders, those who keep Bitcoin for up to a month, so fresh money. Basically, the peak profit is comparable to the profit from March 4th. It was also around 20 to 21%. And the most important thing is that we're currently moving without any significant divergences. So right now the profit has pulled back, and on November 26th it was around 0, just 2%, and yesterday it was 3.6%. If we look at some long-term trends, even, for example, the bounce at the end of 2023, when do we usually see strong corrections? When we see a similarly pronounced divergence in profit-taking by short-term holders. So, in this case, the price made 3 new peaks, while the indicator also made 3 new peaks, each one lower than the last. After which we saw corrections following the acceptance of the Bitcoin ETF. She was there in the region of 20%, I don't remember exactly. About Bitcoin, 2021, a big split 1, 2, 3, even 4, a fourfold divergence. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. It always tends to go pretty much the same way. The only exception might be 2017, but even then there was a divergence. When it comes to short-term holders, it's definitely sharper and more noticeable. Even here we saw a divergence. So now, while there is no obvious discrepancy, there is a local one, 1, 2, 1, 2, but nothing obvious. The profit is cooling off, and considering the current price behavior and the metrics, I reckon Bitcoin will keep rising, and then it will start to show pronounced corrections, like the significant divergences we saw at the end of 2023. So, at least these 2, maybe 3 peaks at the top. So, at least these 2, maybe 3 peaks at the top. Next, I also showed this metric. We still have a discrepancy between the inflows into the spot Bitcoin ETF and the sales of long-term holders, that is, their expenses, a significant discrepancy of about 6 times. And in order for Bitcoin to continue to grow at the same rate, well, some new stimulus is needed. That is, for example, this will be Trump's actual approval of the beginning of the creation of a reserve of Bitcoins. There are 1 million Bitcoins he wanted to buy for the US government, accordingly, for the reserve. Then yes, we could see crazy inflows into the spot ETF again. But for now, the most we can expect is some price growth with a low angle of ascent. So, not in such a dramatic way as it was at the beginning of November with Trump's actual victory, but overall, there's still room for growth. This is confirmed by the overall inflows into Ethereum, Bitcoin, and stablecoins, mainly USDT. So, every day the aggregated market capitalization is hitting new records, with total inflows over the last 30 days already reaching $115 billion in net new money. This isn't just a rebalancing within the system, it's new money, and the cap of stablecoins is also on the rise. At the moment, over $19 billion have been minted in the last 30 days. A lot. And as long as it keeps growing, this wave of the Altseason will carry on. This is just a crazy wave. The same thing happened in March. It was rising, then it stopped, staying flat for about 2 to 3 weeks. During that time, there was a redistribution, with altcoins that hadn't been performing suddenly shooting up, and then everything started to go down. And this is confirmed by the chart showing the volume of stablecoins on exchanges, meaning the net position change is also increasing alongside the minting of stablecoins. And at the moment, it stands at nearly $16 billion, surpassing the peak from November 23rd. So, it's steadily increasing every day. That's also really good. There's a lot of stablecoins on exchanges, and that's fuel for altcoins. So, this is the analysis of the blockchain. So, in summary, first, we're breaking through the all-time high in altcoin market cap, total 3. Most likely, it will be one of two things. Either we move from the current levels, give or take, into a correction of about 15 to 20% on total 3, which would be quite normal considering the current chart. By the way, this is the daily chart. It looks like a 5-minute chart, but this is the daily chart for total 3. Or we break through the all-time high and confidently head towards levels of $1,300 billion, where the targets are roughly located, and then from there we might drop by 20%. In any of these scenarios, this dip will need to be bought up. And you'll need to buy the dip, well, if not with all your cash, then at least with a decent chunk. First. Second, for all of this to happen, we need Bitcoin to either stay steady or grow. The main thing is that it doesn't drop, and based on the metrics we've just discussed, everything is heading in that direction for now. Most likely, considering the unloading on the indicators and the fact that some peak values of certain metrics haven't been reached. Although the current cycle is showing itself quite well in terms of strength. And that's exactly how it is right now. So, Bitcoin is in a sideways movement, and I reckon it's set to break the $100,000 mark in the not-too-distant future. And do it before it updates this correction, well, this low at the $91,000 mark. So, most likely, it will be earlier. It even looks like we're getting squeezed into a triangle on the chart, from which we'll break out upwards by this amount. So you can roughly guess where it's headed, from the exit point to somewhere around $105, $107, $108,000, maybe even $110. That's the target. It's clearly an obvious triangle. That's the second one. Here are the two main conclusions. And thirdly, which basically follows from the first point, is that you need to buy during strong corrections. And the reason I'm actively taking profits right now is to have more free liquidity to buy up the upcoming correction in altcoins. Thanks everyone for your attention. This was Mossad on the line. Have a good evening and goodbye everyone.